The film tells the story of Anne Burden, who lives in a post-apocalyptic world where most of the world's resources have been lost due to radiation. She lives with her dog named Pharaoh, and they spend all their time together on her family's farm, leading a very routine life, mostly gathering food and setting traps for animals. One day she finds a cart on an old road and is curious about its contents. While hearing distant footsteps, they hide by the roadside and see someone in a hazmat suit. They quietly follow the person until he finally takes off his hazmat suit. He is John Loomis, another survivor of the radiation. John, an engineer, after ensuring that the area is free from radioactive air, takes off his suit and rejoices at finally breathing fresh air. Anne follows him to the nearest waterfall where John cleans himself. Knowing that the water is contaminated, Anne immediately tells him to get out of the water, but John is surprised when he sees her. John points a gun at her and warns her, but thinks that Anne is not a dangerous person. So he starts listening to Anne and quickly gets out of the waterfall. The water has poisoned him, and he quickly returns to his cart to get some medicine. Anne helps him to inject the medicine, also rinses him with clean water, and takes him home to rest. While John rests, Anne takes his cart and sees a photo of John with a woman who might be his wife. For days, John lies in bed, and Anne ensures that he receives the care he needs. One night, Anne hears John having a nightmare. She immediately comes to his room and tries to calm him down. As the days go by, John's condition weakens. Anne prays sympathetically beside his bed, sincerely praying for John's recovery. The next day, John's health begins to improve. Their relationship grows closer. They humbly talk about their past lives and show each other family photo albums. Anne was left alone after her family members went on a journey to find other survivors, but they never returned. She misses her younger brother very much. Anne also shows John a photo of herself. As an engineer, John theorizes that Anne's farm is protected from radioactive contamination due to rocky hill slopes and favorable weather patterns. After that conversation, Anne hugs John. The next day, John goes outside to see Anne working. He notices an old tractor. Anne tells him that the tractor ran out of gas, so she never used it. Then John tells her how to manually make gasoline from a nearby abandoned station with his knowledge of engines. She follows the written instructions on paper and finally manages to get enough gasoline to run his long-dead tractor. At dinner, John notices Anne praying. He talks about his previous journey and says that he lived a mile underground. John decides to leave because he can't stand being there anymore without seeing the sun. Then Anne asks about John's wife after seeing photos in his cart. However, he said no. It was just a girl from his past. That night, both felt an increasing attraction to each other, but they ignored those thoughts. Anne and John spent the next day at a lake where John offered fresh fish, something Anne hadn't eaten in a long time. While John enjoyed his luxurious meal, she remembered the past winter when she almost froze and starved to death because her generator was broken. She couldn't keep food and other supplies. After hearing that Anne had a generator, John offered to fix it, hoping it would help them store more food. While fixing the generator, John believed they could use the contaminated waterfall as a source for hydroelectric power. This could work with water built from the planks and wood of the church, which meant the sacred building had to be destroyed. However, Anne was uncomfortable because her father built the church for worship, and she also preached there every week. The building was a part of her life because it held deep sentimental value. John eventually decided not to pursue the project. In the following days, they worked together around the farm to supply food and other resources. At this point, they both saw each other's shortcomings rooted in their work ethic and spiritual beliefs. At the store, Anne saw John drunk with an empty beer bottle beside him. John mocked Anne for eating all the sweet food, saturated with the non-alcoholic drink he found, not beer. Anne helped him up and took him home to rest. When Anne was taking out the dirty laundry, John became restless and yelled at her for helping too much. He repeatedly said he didn't need her help at all. Even John pushed her against the wall and started kissing her. Anne's shy nature was shaken because she had never done such a thing before. Anne walked out of the room in fear, realizing he was wrong. The next morning, John apologized to Anne, and she forgave him. They continued to work together as if nothing had happened the night before. At dinner, Anne surprised John with a bottle of wine. After a few glasses, they both got drunk and danced together in the living room. That night, as they danced together, they grew closer until they finally kissed, and it was Anne's first kiss. They went upstairs and continued to make love. But suddenly Anne became hesitant. She said she was afraid that things like this could really change their relationship, but it didn't change the fact that Anne liked him. She also added that they needed more time to get to know each other. As usual, Anne monitored the farm and noticed changes in her traps. Her dog, Faro, suddenly ran off fast, leaving Anne, and when she followed him, she met a man named Caleb, who was the third survivor. He also said that he had been friends with Faro since being left behind. Caleb asked Anne for a glass of water, so Anne took him home. However, he was surprised to see John holding a rifle. Anne then calmed him down and introduced Caleb to John. When the commotion subsided, Caleb told them he had walked 50 miles from the mine to look for food and other resources until he reached the farm and said he had to camp outside for a while. However, Anne refused. Anne told John that she couldn't bear to leave him outside, so she allowed Caleb to stay in the house. Anne then invited Caleb in, and the three of them shared food and space, as well as stories about the horrors of being in such a situation. John said that before he arrived at Anne's farm, he found a sickly teenager covered in dirt. He tried to care for the boy, but his body was too weak. The boy begged him to kill him, and out of pity, John did it. On the other hand, Caleb also shared his traumatic experiences. He was trapped during the first week, witnessing men killing each other due to the dire conditions. After eating, Anne took Caleb around the house. Because John was jealous, he kept reminding Anne to be careful because they didn't know anything about Caleb, and he might be a dangerous person. They had a heated argument about John's mindset on several issues, until it came to the topic of the boy he killed. John sat at the table and told her that the boy he killed was her brother. Hearing this, Anne was silent, unable to speak. She didn't dare to look at John and could only hold back her tears. The next day, John and Caleb decided to go turkey hunting. While walking around, Caleb emphasized his spiritual connection with Anne and suggested a light bet to win her over. But John disagreed. Compared to John's serious and logical personality, Caleb was more relaxed. They walked near the waterfall, where John explained the canceled project about the water wheel that could be a source of electricity. At dinner, Caleb mentioned the water wheel and church project, but John felt uncomfortable and explained that the church held a place in her heart. Yet Anne now agreed to the idea of building the water wheel. They were surprised by Anne's statement. Caleb told her that she didn't have to agree if she wasn't ready, but Anne stood her ground. The next day, work began. They demolished the church and collected wood. Slowly, the building crumbled. Only memories of Anne's father remained. As they worked, Anne and Caleb began to bond. John quickly realized it. They began to exchange glances that signaled their attraction to each other. During the project, Anne and Caleb grew closer. Anne and Caleb walked in the forest and ended up in a nearby cave. They talked about their shared faith in Christianity, claiming it was the only thing that kept them going. When they arrived at the location, John had made significant progress in building the water wheel. The simple structure gave them more hope that life in this post-apocalyptic world could improve in the simplest ways. That night, John asked to speak with Anne. He claimed he had to tell her something important. He felt the attraction between Anne and Caleb. Awkwardly, John gave his consent for Anne to have a relationship with Caleb, and also said that Anne had the right to pursue anything and anyone she wanted. John responded with discriminatory comments and said he wouldn't interfere in his journey to be with someone else. After hearing John's words, Anne immediately walked out of the room. The three of them spent the following days building a water wheel around the contaminated waterfall. After remarkable progress, they held a celebratory dinner as a break from their achievement. After a few drinks, they decided to dive into the pool where they continued to have fun. However, as the air turned cold, they decided to return home and end the night. Shortly after, John, in tears, confessed his love for Anne, which he found hard to believe. They held hands. John, who was drunk, then passed out on the bed. Anne heard that Caleb was still awake in his room, so she walked towards Caleb's room, hoping he would welcome her, and they made love to each other after days of just staring at each other. In the morning, the three of them were awkward, unlike the peaceful days before. As Caleb sat near Anne, John immediately realized what had happened the night before. Then John and Caleb completed the water wheel structure and installed the flume to the place above the waterfall. Meanwhile, John was in charge of securing the rope, where Caleb did his more risky work, securing the flume in place. Finally, the project went smoothly and successfully, making them smile and forget their rivalry for a while. With his hazmat suit on, Caleb climbed up with the help of the rope, but suddenly slipped. But fortunately, John managed to pull the rope, and both men carefully locked eyes, while Caleb was still staggering on the edge of the cliff. After that, John returned home alone. He apologized for making their relationship unclear by cutting out the details of the conversation, and said that Caleb had to leave and travel south. Anne was surprised but wasted no time, and ran out hoping Caleb was still there, but she didn't see him. Anne was truly shocked and speechless, while John stood at the edge of the cliff where Caleb once stood and checked the depth of the waterfall. After days of pondering Caleb's sudden disappearance, Anne learned that the house's electricity had returned. She happily ran out and found her favorite organ in the shed, then immediately played it. Shortly after, John entered and listened while clapping as if guilt enveloped him, and the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.